The Second Empire witnessed remarkable economic expansion. Railroad construction exploded across France, connecting previously isolated regions and facilitating the growth of industry and commerce. The establishment of new financial institutions, including the Crédit Lyonnais and Crédit Agricole, supported business development. Industrial production increased dramatically, and France began to challenge British economic supremacy in certain sectors. Politically, Napoleon III pursued what he called liberal empire, gradually introducing democratic reforms throughout his reign. Press censorship was relaxed, the legislative body gained increased powers, and political opposition was increasingly tolerated. The Constitution of 1870 established a parliamentary system that significantly limited imperial power, representing a genuine attempt at constitutional monarchy. The Second Empire's foreign policy was more complex and ultimately less successful than its domestic achievements. Napoleon III intervened in the Crimean War 1854–1856 alongside Britain against Russia, seeking to enhance French prestige and break the post-Napoleonic diplomatic isolation. The war's success helped establish France as a major European power once again. The empire's colonial policy was aggressive and expansionist. French forces conquered Algeria completely, established protectorates in Tunisia and Morocco, and expanded into West Africa and Indochina. The disastrous Mexican expedition, 1861–1867, however, demonstrated the limits of French power. Napoleon III's attempt to establish a French-backed empire under Maximilian of Austria ended in failure when American pressure and Mexican resistance forced French withdrawal, leading to Maximilian's execution. The Italian campaigns of 1859 represented both success and limitation. French victories at Magenta and Solferino helped Italian unification by driving Austrian forces from northern Italy. But Napoleon III's separate peace with Austria frustrated Italian nationalists and demonstrated the complexity of European balance of power politics. The Second Empire's downfall came with the Franco-Prussian War of 1870–1871. Otto von Bismarck's diplomatic maneuvering over Spanish succession created the pretext for war, which Napoleon III felt compelled to declare despite military unpreparedness. The war quickly turned disastrous for France. Superior Prussian organization, equipment, and strategy led to a series of French defeats culminating in Napoleon III's capture at the Battle of Sedan on September 2, 1870. The emperor's capture precipitated the collapse of the empire. The Third Republic was proclaimed in Paris on September 4, 1870, and Napoleon III was deposed. The subsequent siege of Paris and the Treaty of Frankfurt imposed harsh terms on France, including the loss of Alsace-Lorraine and a massive indemnity. The empire's end marked the conclusion of the Napoleonic era in French history and established the Third Republic, which would endure until 1940. The French Empire's legacy extends far beyond its military conquests and political achievements. The Napoleonic Code influenced legal systems across Europe, Latin America, and former French colonies. The administrative and educational systems established during the First Empire provided models for modern state organization. The empire's emphasis on merit-based advancement, religious tolerance, and legal equality helped spread Enlightenment ideals across Europe. Culturally, the empire left an indelible mark on European consciousness. Neoclassical architecture, Romantic literature celebrating the Napoleonic legend, and the concept of the great man in history all stemmed from this period. The empire's rise and fall provided literary and artistic inspiration for generations, from Stendhal and Victor Hugo to Tolstoy's War and Peace. Economically, both empires contributed significantly to French and European development. The First Empire's continental system, despite its ultimate failure, demonstrated the interconnectedness of European economies. The Second Empire's railroad construction and financial innovations laid foundations for modern industrial capitalism in France. The French Empire ultimately represented a unique synthesis of revolutionary ideals and traditional imperial ambition. While it failed to create lasting political structures, its cultural, legal, and administrative innovations profoundly influenced the development of the modern world. The empire's story remains one of the most dramatic and consequential chapters in European history, illustrating both the possibilities and limitations of individual ambition in shaping historical destiny. From Napoleon's rise from obscurity to continental domination to his nephew's attempts at liberal empire, the French Empire embodied the tensions and transformations of a Europe transitioning from the old regime to the modern era. The French Empire represents one of the most significant and transformative periods in European and world history, fundamentally reshaping the political, social, and cultural landscape of the early 19th century. This comprehensive examination traces the empire's origins, expansion, achievements, and ultimate dissolution across two distinct periods under Napoleon Bonaparte and Napoleon III. The French Empire emerged from the chaos and revolutionary fervor that had consumed France since 1789. The French Revolution had dismantled the ancient monarchy, executed King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette, and plunged the nation into a period of radical political experimentation. However, by the late 1790s, the Directory government had proven ineffective at maintaining stability or defending France against the coalitions of European monarchies determined to crush revolutionary ideals. Into this vacuum stepped Napoleon Bonaparte, a brilliant military officer of Corsican origin who had distinguished himself in the Revolutionary Wars. Through the coup of 18 Brumaire in November 1799, Napoleon overthrew the Directory and established the consulate, initially positioning himself as first consul alongside two other consuls. This marked the beginning of his meteoric rise to absolute power. Napoleon's early years in power were characterized by remarkable administrative and legal reforms. He established the Concordat of 1801 with the Catholic Church, healing the religious schism that had divided France since the Revolution. Most significantly, he oversaw the creation of the Napoleonic Code in 1804, a comprehensive legal system that would influence legal frameworks worldwide and remains the foundation of French law today. This civil code emphasized individual rights, property rights, and legal equality, representing a synthesis of revolutionary principles with practical governance. On December 2, 1804, Napoleon crowned himself Emperor of the French in Notre Dame Cathedral, with Pope Pius VII present but notably not performing the coronation. This symbolic act demonstrated Napoleon's assertion of supreme authority while maintaining the appearance of religious legitimacy. The transformation from consulate to empire marked the formal beginning of the First French Empire. The early years of the empire were defined by nearly constant warfare as Napoleon faced successive coalitions of European powers. The Third Coalition, 1805, brought together Austria, Russia, and Britain against France. Napoleon's tactical genius reached its zenith at the Battle of Austerlitz on December 2, 1805, where he decisively defeated the combined Austrian and Russian armies. This victory, considered his masterpiece, established French hegemony over continental Europe and led to the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire. The continental system, implemented beginning in 1806, represented Napoleon's attempt to defeat Britain economically by prohibiting European trade with the British Isles. This ambitious policy aimed to strangle British commerce and force them to seek peace, but it ultimately proved counterproductive, creating economic hardship across Europe and fostering resentment against French rule. Napoleon's empire reached its territorial zenith around 1810 to 1811, encompassing not only France but vast swaths of Europe. The empire directly controlled territories including Belgium, the Netherlands, parts of Germany, northern Italy, and the Illyrian provinces along the Adriatic coast. Additionally, Napoleon installed family members and loyal generals as rulers of satellite kingdoms. His brother Joseph became King of Spain, Jerome ruled Westphalia, and Marshal Murat governed Naples. This system created a complex web of dependencies that extended French influence from the Atlantic to the borders of Russia. The emperor's domestic achievements during this period were substantial. He established a centralized administrative system with prefects governing departments, created the University of France to standardize education, and undertook massive public works projects including roads, bridges, and the Arc de Triomphe. The empire's cultural influence was equally profound, with the neoclassical style dominating architecture and the arts across Europe. The beginning of the end came with the disastrous Russian campaign of 1812. Napoleon's invasion of Russia with a Grande Armée of over 600,000 men represented the largest military expedition in European history to that point. However, Russian tactics of strategic retreat, scorched earth policies, and the brutal winter of 1812 decimated the French forces. The retreat from Moscow became one of the greatest military disasters in history, with fewer than 30,000 combat-effective soldiers surviving the campaign. The catastrophe in Russia emboldened Napoleon's enemies, leading to the formation of the Sixth Coalition in 1813, the Battle of Nations at Leipzig. In October 1813 saw Napoleon face the combined armies of Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Sweden. His defeat marked the beginning of the end for the French Empire. Allied forces invaded France itself in 1814, and with his marshals and political support crumbling, Napoleon was forced to abdicate on April 6, 1814. The Treaty of Fontainebleau exiled Napoleon to the island of Elba while restoring the Bourbon monarchy under Louis XVIII. However, Napoleon's exile proved short-lived. On March 1, 1815, he landed in France and began the famous 100 Days, during which he regained power without firing a shot as soldiers flocked to his cause. This dramatic return culminated in the Battle of Waterloo on June 18, 1815, where the Duke of Wellington and Prussian forces under Blucher finally ended Napoleon's political career. He was subsequently exiled to the remote island of St. Helena, where he died in 1821. The Second French Empire emerged from the political instability of the Second Republic. Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, nephew of Napoleon I, was elected President of France in 1848 following the February Revolution. However, constitutional limits on presidential power and his own imperial ambitions led him to stage a coup d'état on December 2, 1851, exactly 47 years after his uncle's coronation. Following a plebiscite that approved his actions, he proclaimed himself Emperor Napoleon III on December 2, 1852. Napoleon III's reign, known as the Second Empire, lasted 18 years and was characterized by significant modernization and economic development. Unlike his uncle's reign, which was dominated by warfare, Napoleon III focused primarily on domestic transformation and economic growth. He oversaw the massive reconstruction of Paris under Baron Haussmann, creating the wide boulevards, parks, and architectural unity that characterize modern Paris. This urban planning project not only beautified the capital, but also facilitated commerce and made future revolutionary barricades more difficult to construct.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more engaging historical content.